The poor fellow soldiers of Christ and the Temple of Solomon, more commonly known as the Knights Templar, are famous for their legendary warriors, their blend of faith and militarism, their protection of pilgrims in the Holy Land, and of course their instrumental role throughout the Crusades, both in protecting the Latin kingdoms, predominantly Jerusalem, and in wide-ranging financial management across Christendom. But what many people don't know is that in 1187, shortly before the Third Crusade was launched, the Templars suffered through something of a wilderness year, wherein most of the order in the Holy Land was wiped out through disastrous military defeats, Jerusalem was lost to the Ayyubid Sultan Saladin, and they were ousted from both their headquarters in Jerusalem and in Acre, and a number of their most significant fortresses. Now that might sound surprising given the Templars' enduring legendary legacy, but in the latter years of the order they were forced out of the Middle East, losing their last stronghold in 1291 before of course they were turned upon by Philip IV of France, who was deeply jealous of the Templars' great wealth and expertise in financial administration, and then arrested and wiped out the order by 1312 to 1314 alongside suppression from, reluctantly, Pope Clement V. So in this video we'll explore how exactly the Templars suffered such a sudden and shocking decline from a period of hitherto meteoric rise to their peak in the mid-1100s, and trust me, there are some crazy decisions made by Templar high officials, including the Grand Master that contributed to this, and what happened after they were ousted, leading up to the Third Crusade in 1189 that saw Richard the Lionheart, the King of England, French King Philip II, and Emperor Frederick Barbarossa of the Holy Roman Empire join the fray. Now, the Templars' decline can mainly be attributed to two major military defeats, first at the Battle of Cresson and secondly at the Battle of Hattin. But first, in 1187, and the Templars' first major defeat to the Ayyubids, the Battle of Cresson. On the night of the 30th of April 1187, Christian lookouts who were stationed in Nazareth spotted a large number of Saladin's armed men moving past the town on a reconnaissance mission to scope out the nearby fortified town of Sephoria, a few miles to the northwest, which acted as a key assembly point for large parts of a Christian army raised by the King of Jerusalem, Guy, to resist Saladin's increasing incursions into Latin territory. The Saracens, as the Crusaders called them, were now making a concerted effort to march into the heart of the Christian kingdoms, exploiting a slightly sketchy personal truce agreed with the king's rival Count Raymond of Tripoli that allowed the Ayyubids tentative access, and they were led by one of Saladin's most trusted military commanders, a Turkish emir known as Gokbori, or the Blue Wolf, who shared command of the army with Saladin's son and heir apparent, Al-Afdal. At the same time, a small Frankish force led by the Master of the Knights Templar, Gerard of Ridefort, and also containing brothers of the Knights Hospitaller, were on their way to attend a peace conference organised between King Guy of Jerusalem and Count Raymond. But when Gerard learned of the presence of Saladin's men on this reconnaissance mission, he was furious, seeing their encroachment as a serious affront to the Kingdom of Jerusalem. He was known to have a combative character, often making hasty decisions and ignoring advice from other experienced knights, and took a hard interpretation of his role as the leader of the Templars. His duty, as he saw it, was to defend the Christian kingdoms, whatever the cost, to defend Outremer. Thus, Gerard sent a message with haste to the nearest Templar garrison at Cacao, now Cacun, summoning 80 of the Knight brothers stationed there, as well as 10 Hospitallers and 40 of the king's personal retainer, and instead of continuing to the peace talks, they turned towards Nazareth, aiming to put Saladin's men to flight and drive them out. Considering the speed at which it was brought together, this was a respectable force, but against the 7,000 that Saladin's men commanded, it was tiny, which any other leader would surely avoid conflict with. But Gerard was not like any other leader. He was rash, driven by intense zealousness, and on the morning of the 1st of May 1187, the disparity of the two armies became awfully apparent as the Templars tracked down Al-Afdal and his army to a wooded area near the springs of Cresson, a natural fountain not far from Nazareth. Now, by this time, Gerard had mustered nearly a full complement of Templar officials who themselves assessed the scene and recommended a discreet withdrawal, saying they should instead pick their battles rather than launch what they believed would be a suicidal charge into a far larger army. But remember, this was Gerard of Ridderford we're talking about. The German chronicler Oliver of Paderborn, when describing the Templar commander at Cresson, wrote that Gerard was an energetic knight, but impetuous and rash, and that even given the advantage of a surprise attack, it was vain to believe that a few hundred men fighting against thousands would lead to anything but total annihilation. Gerard, though, insisted to his fellow officials that it was their duty to Christ to charge, turning to the leader of their fellow military order, the Hospitallers, James of Mai, and sneering at him for cowardice, before launching into a flamboyant speech about fighting for the inheritance of Christ, and that the red crosses upon their white mantles positively demanded that they stand and fight. Thus, the Templars obeyed their master. Indeed, under their vows they had little choice, and as they began their charge towards the mass horde, shouted together, "Christ is our life and death is our reward." And thus the remarkable action of a few hundred Templar knights called from their castle bastions, swallowing the fear and attacking against impossible odds in the name of their lord, occurred on that day. But it was indeed death that they found, and the battle at Cresson would go on to mark a dark day in Templar history. Only a handful escaped alive, including of course the one who orchestrated it all, Gerard, who was badly wounded but eventually left the battlefield escorted by 3 brothers. Around 60 knights were killed, including Templars and Hospitallers, the rest imprisoned, and the master of the Hospitallers, who had warned against the charge, was beheaded by Saladin's men. As Dan Jones wrote in his book, The Templars' Rise and Fall of God's Holy Warriors, quote, "The Templars and their companions had sought the crown of martyrdom, and they had found it. So had the master of the Hospitallers, along with a number of his own brothers and a large number of the citizens of Nazareth, who had been following the company of knights at a distance, hoping for plunder, only to be set upon by Muslim riders as they fled for home." This was a disaster for the Templars, but it was not the worst loss in terms of sheer numbers that they would suffer that year. Just 2 months later, in July of 1187, Saladin had mustered a force of around 30,000 men that was steaming across the Holy Land, capturing towns and fortresses as it went. King Guy of Jerusalem had himself mustered a force around 20,000 men, which included a contingent of around 1,200 knights. The Templars, again commanded by Gerard of Ridderford, brought to the king's army around 150 of their most experienced knight brothers and another 300 foot soldiers of the order. In an effort to lure out the Christian army, though, Saladin ordered his forces to besiege the Crusader stronghold of Tiberias, and the king of Jerusalem took the bait. He forced his entire army to march across a hot, arid plain with barely enough food or water to relieve Tiberias. They were constantly harassed on their journey by Saladin's horse archers, and under the intense summer heat, many died. Count Raymond of Tripoli urged King Guy to reach the Sea of Galilee and encamp next to a secure water source and regenerate their forces, but the king refused, instead deciding to encamp his extremely thirsty army away from a secure water source near the horns of Hattin, an extinct volcano, for the night. And thus, with their morale shattered before even engaging in battle, the Christian army rested, and overnight Saladin's forces encircled them, cutting off any opportunity to collect water, and the next morning, July the 4th, 1187, the broken Christian force was set upon by Saladin, who had also ordered his men to prepare the battlefield by lighting bushfires and smoking the Crusaders out. Despite many attempts to charge and break out of their desperate situation, the army was systematically destroyed on the slopes of Hattin, with both the King of Jerusalem and the Grand Master Gerard captured by Saladin. Not only this, but a relic of the True Cross, a fragment that was carried into battle as a talisman, was also taken by Saladin's forces, dealing a huge blow to Christian morale. And so, once again, under terrible military leadership, another defeat was suffered, and nearly the entire army of the Kingdom of Jerusalem was annihilated. This left the Crusader states utterly defenceless, and in the following months Saladin went on to capture key cities like Jaffa and Acre, where the Templars held a key base, and most importantly Jerusalem, which fell in October of 1187. Thus the Templars were dealt a blow from which they never really recovered. Nearly the entire order that was present in the Holy Land was wiped out in 1187. Most key commanders were killed, either on the field or summarily executed following capture, in what was a gruesome compliment to their military effectiveness, and only high-value prisoners like, of course, Gerard the Grand Master was spared, later ransomed. Gerard always seems to survive. The garrisons of Templar castles and fortified settlements were severely depleted, leading to their capture by Saladin with relative ease, and this happened over 50 locations, lost by mid-September of 1187, and their historic headquarters at the Temple Mount in Jerusalem was lost. Losing such property and revenue streams throughout the Holy Land also devastated the Order's monetary situation, and so the Order, the Knights Templar that had come to such prowess throughout the 11th century, was reduced to a shadow of its former self in a matter of months, leading to a depressing wilderness year where the surviving members holed up in encampments or in Tyre, the only city to resist Saladin. Such rapid and shocking losses to Christian control of the Holy Land utterly shocked the rest of Europe, and so the wheels began turning that eventually launched the Third Crusade 2 years later in 1189, aiming to recapture Outremer and oust Saladin. But that is a story for another day. I hope you've enjoyed this video. We were focusing on the decline of the Templars, such a shocking, rapid decline in 1187, leading to that wilderness year. What is also shocking in an era of such stark political divides, though, is that there is actually a definitive location for unbiased news coverage, and that place is Ground News. They show you exactly what side of the political aisle is pushing which stories, factuality scores for major publishers, even showing you your own news bias by which stories you gravitate towards the most. They also have brand new features such as podcasts, and I'm really pleased to say that I have an exclusive link for my community which gives all of you a huge 40% off Ground News' highest tier, their Vantage plan, which is the one that I use daily. So thank you so much, Ground News, for giving me this link. Thank you to all of you for making this possible. If you want to support me and to support unbiased journalism as well, scan the QR code that's up on screen now or click the link down below in the description. I very much hope you've enjoyed this video going over the Templars' rapid and shocking decline, their wilderness year, and if you want to join as a channel member, the links are down below in the description as well, or you can buy me a coffee down there. But liking and subscribing is amazing. Thank you so much for making it to the end of the video, and I will see you in the next one.